Hey guys, thanks for tuning in to another video on InRangeTV. We are here today at SHOT Show at the Knights Armament booth, and we are taking a look at a pair of really cool brand new machine guns being made by Knights. And these are developed to fulfill a military request for something that's a little bit, well, it's a type of usage that's existed for at least 100 years.
It's a role that's been desirable for at least over 100 years.
Yeah.
When we go back to World War I, you see them taking what were emplaced machine guns that were far too heavy to move dynamically in the field, lightening the gun and trying to make them viable. Things like the MG0815, trying to do an assault with a gun that they could actually move as one individual man.
Right. So the nomenclature on this is actually, what they're calling it is the light assault machine gun, which I think is some nomenclature that'll drive a few people a little nuts, but it does a good job of accurately describing what the purpose of the gun is. The idea is to have a belt-fed, fully automatic, high-capacity, belts, 100, 200 rounds on the gun, weapon that can be fired effectively from the shoulder as well as from a bipod or maybe even a tripod rest. But one that can be used during an assault when you are closing in on an objective and actually capturing it, and then also holding that objective. So, I mean, if we take this all the way back to World War I tactics, the idea was you would assault a trench, take the trench, and then there would be a pretty much immediate counterattack, because the best opportunity that the other side had to retake that position was immediately after they'd lost it. And so that's where guns like the 0815 and the Shosha and the BAR were valuable. You had the firepower to help take the position, and then when the Germans came back at you, you now had machine guns in your new position. They may not have been tripod-mounted heavy machine guns, but it was a lot better than just bolt-action rifles, and this is fulfilling that same role. Today, I think the places you see this are going to be things like the PKM, belt box attached to the gun, a bipod on the gun. It can be fired from the shoulder. The PKM's decent.
Yes.
The modernized iterations of the M60, which again have been lightened. You see vertical front grips on them. Rate of fire maybe reduced a little bit. Capable of being fired from the shoulder, but in M60, even a modernized one, you're still talking, I think, something like 18 pounds. And this in 7.62 is 13.25 pounds, 6 kilos.
So what you see is guys taking what they had in the field and trying to push it into a role that it really wasn't designed for.
Right.
There's even, media versions of this. You look at Full Metal Jacket, you see the machine, the M60 gunner actually using his M60 as an assault or a light assault machine gun, even though it really wasn't a light assault machine gun.
Right.
And there's little snippets of that actually demonstrate what we're talking about here quite well in that film.
The background on this thing, it is part of the reason that it is so light is it is pretty much an all aluminum receiver, aluminum trigger frame. A lot has been put into this gun to keep it lightweight. I mentioned this one's 6 kilos, 13.25 pounds. The 5.56 version is 8.6 pounds. That is under 4 kilograms. It is just a remarkably lightweight gun. There are competition ARs that weigh substantially more than this.
That's lighter than a number of M4s people are running around with.
Yes,
exactly.
Substantially lighter than an M1 Garand.
Absolutely, yes.
So there are, the development of this goes back to Stoner. He started this design in about 1985, and it's been in, I think, pretty much constant development and iteration since then, and the result today is really quite impressive.
So it's applying the constant recoil system,
Yes.
which is part of what makes this such an interesting design.
Right, so the idea is the bolt never actually impacts the back of the receiver, and that has substantial implications for recoil control. One of the things that we've seen looking at high-speed video is you don't actually see the gun and the shooter move in high speed when you fire. What happens? You fire, and then the bolt starts coming back, and then the bolt, in virtually everything, impacts the back of the receiver or the buffer or some part of the gun itself. And when that bolt impacts, that's when you see the shooter recoil backwards. And what the constant recoil system, which was, I think, a Jim Sullivan he originally came up with the idea.
You see it in his Ultimax.
Right, exactly.
Yep.
And the Ultimax was one of the guns that inspired some of the elements of this, taking that constant recoil mechanism and using it. So the bolt cycles all the way to the rear and then stops on its own spring pressure without ever hitting the receiver, which means the gun just doesn't recoil harshly like most everything else does.
You have a genuinely smoother impulse, although impulse isn't really the word because it isn't striking anything. But as a result, since this bolt is cycling without ever striking anything, this gun stays flat during the duration of fire, as well as you have a consistent rate of fire regardless of the gun heating up or the ammunition being used.
Right, because the hotter the ammo, the faster the bolt is initially projected backwards. The more gas pressure. We'll take these apart in just a minute and show you how they work internally, but the hotter the ammo, the faster the bolt gets moving, which means the farther it travels, and this basically balances out. The farther it travels, the longer it takes to do it, even if it's going faster to begin with. Lower pressured ammo, lighter ammo, the bolt doesn't go as far back, which means it takes less time, and the rate of fire of these is set right about 600 RPM, which is done for a very specific reason.
It's interesting you've mentioned that, because in other videos we've done about submachine guns, not necessarily an assault machine gun, we've talked about how the rate of fire actually dictates a lot of the comfortable nature or not comfortable nature of firing a specific gun.
Right.
A rate of fire that's too low just becomes this jumbly bouncing around problem. A rate of fire that can be very much too high can actually be hard to control or burn up your ammunition too quickly. There's a harmonic or sweet spot that either on the lower end or on the higher end that actually becomes this constant impulse that allows you to control the gun and keep the rounds on target or in a specific beat zone.
Knights recognizes this, Stoner recognized this, and as a result, they very specifically chose the rate of fire for these guns at a low rate of fire that doesn't burn up all your ammo really quickly like a 42, but allows you to fire it controllably from the shoulder.
It's funny, we also got to speak to some of the guys that are involved in the criteria process for this gun, and they were specifically mentioning how the rate of fire on this gun being in that 600 realm keeps it to be that incredibly easy to shoot and keep it on target gun.
Right. One of the cool things is getting to look at this and also having talked to the guy who actually wrote the RFP for this gun for the US.
And want to apply it in the field in a way, because they've been there, done that, and they know what they want the gun to do to have that assault, have the sustained rate of fire that they need.
All right, shall we pull this apart?
Let's take it apart.
All right, so we're going to take apart the 5.56 version. The 7.62 version is mechanically the same thing, scaled up slightly, so we'll stick to just this guy, and let's dig into it.
Cool.
All right, we will start with barrel removal. There's a big thumb latch here. Push it down and the barrel comes out. However, the feed tray actually locks this catch in place, so the barrel can't possibly come out unless you have the tray open and you want it to. In addition, kind of neat, the tab here that locks it in place also works as a lever to depress the tab easily. So what that means is you can have a really stiff spring in here, really firmly keeping the barrel locked in place, but it's still easy to pull it out when you want it out. So we can take the barrel. This is a 15-inch barrel standard. Then we can actually go ahead and pull the top cover assembly. There's a captive pin here. Once that's out, we can pull this guy. So there's one half of your feed mechanism, just a feed tray. And then the other half of the feed mechanism is right here, a couple of spring-loaded feed pawls. This is going to stay in place until I take the bolt out because it's positively controlled by the travel of the bolt and carrier. Now, in order to get the back end of the gun apart, we need to start by bringing the bolt forward. We need to decompress the recoil spring. So you can actually see how this is controlled by travel of the bolt carrier there. Now, we're going to start by taking off the buttstock. Take this lever, pull it forward, stock comes off. The stock is completely solid, so this one is a collapsing buttstock. It'd be super easy to do folding stocks, some sort of special paratrooper stock, whatever, because there's no mechanics in this. Then we're going to go to this button right here. That allows us to remove the fire control group. Back here, pull the trigger to drop the sear. This slides off. That's the whole fire control group. Because the rate of fire is low at 550 or 600 rounds a minute, there is no real need for a semi-auto selector on it. So while there is not a semi or full auto selector, there is a manual safety on it right here. Red for fire, and you just push that through for safe. Locks, it's a very simple mechanism for a safety. There is a second trip right here. Because this is an open bolt firearm, you have the same problem or potential problem you will see in submachine guns, namely, what if you pull the bolt back far enough to clear the feed mechanism, but not far enough to actually catch on the firing sear? You don't want to be able to pull it back slightly, let go of the bolt, and have it slam forward and fire. So this trip, when you start pulling the bolt back, if you don't get it all the way back, the sear doesn't allow the bolt to go all the way forward and fire. With the trigger assembly off, we can pull out the recoil spring and guide. It's a long spring, thank you, constant recoil system. We'll point out here the charging handle is on this side. There's a matching channel on the other side of the receiver, and you can flip the charging handle over to the other side if you desire. Got 2 different engagement surfaces here to work with the safety system, and then the bolt carrier comes out of the gun. That leaves us with just the bare receiver completely field stripped. Knights does have one of their bipods on here. This is the same sort of bipod, or same family of bipods they use on their sniper rifles. This one is set up for pivot, but not rotational motion. There's a separate version that has a second pivot mechanism in it. Can, of course, fold forward, fold back, extend, depress, and then a tensioning mechanism right here, which we're going to pull out. You can manually set it and then lock it in place. And adjust tension for how much or how little you want this to be able to pivot. Bipod is an important piece of kit on a gun like a belt-fed machine gun to allow you to really get accurate, sustained fire off the ground. So a lot of people are going to recognize elements of this from the Stoner 63 system, being both originally designed by Stoner. One of the neat things in the Stoner is this series of moving counterweights to prevent bolt bounce. That's not something that's relevant here because this fires from an open bolt, where the Stoner 63 fired from a closed bolt. So this gets to be a little bit simpler. We can remove the bolt by going in here. Even modern guns, universal disassembly tool. We're going to push in this detent, rotate the firing pin 90 degrees. Firing pin and its spring come out, and then cam pin comes out, and the bolt comes out. And that's the whole thing right there. So one of the cool things, this has gone through enough iterations that it really is a very mature and well-developed system, despite being ostensibly a new product on the market. That's something that we see with basically all military firearms. You look at the M16, the M16 today isn't the same as the M16 in the 1950s or 60s. The iterative development has really just made it a better and better gun. And because this has its roots in a gun from the 80s, we have the same product development basically that's already taken place here. One other cool thing to point out, if you look on the bolt, you'll see that the locking lugs are actually rounded. That reduces stress on them significantly by not having corners. A lot of little details like that that go into a gun like this.
But this is belt fed, and there's a real reason for that.
Well, it gives you a lot more ammunition.
Yep. Well, the ability to just links together and have a sustained rate without a reload is an incredibly important thing during an assault.
Right.
When you're providing covering fire, either at a bounding overwatch or a retreat, God forbid, you need that gun not to run dry, because running dry is when guys die.
Or holding a position.
Yes, absolutely.
You've got your maneuver and assault to take a position, and then you've got the building or the hill or the trench, and now you have to hold it when you might very well be facing an immediate counterattack, and having belt-fed fire superiority immediately upon capturing the position is a very valuable thing.
It's strange that we see this because with the M27 Iar, which is a magazine-fed gun that's supposed to replace the saw in the at least the Marine application, magazine-fed, their concept is they want to apply a lot of fire to a very accurate beat zone and suppress the enemy there. But boy, you run dry quick.
Yeah.
And this is not what that's for. When you're applying the assault, you may not know where that enemy is, or you may not know what you need to suppress, and having the transversal and all that on the bipod allows you to keep that beat zone wider and longer.
Right.
All right.
Well, hopefully you guys enjoyed this. It is very cool to have gotten a kind of a sneak preview at both of these guns, and they're really impressive guns. And hopefully we'll get a chance to do some actual live fire with them at some point coming up. But either way, a big thanks to Knights Armament for letting us take a look. If you guys enjoy seeing this sort of thing on the web, please do consider checking out our Patreon account. We are an entirely viewer-supported channel, and you can, of course, find us at YouTube, Facebook, BitChute, and Full30.
Yep. And maybe more in the future.
Yes.
Thanks for watching.